Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to episode number 44 of the Lead to Greatness podcast, where we believe in helping others reach their greatest potential, and together we can change the world. Today on Lead to Greatness, we have Dr. Christie Murray. Dr. Christie Murray brings over 27 years of diverse expertise in education, college consulting, engineering, business, strategy planning, leadership development, policy formation, public safety, strategy communications, program management, and facilitation. Dr. Murray is Director of Stakeholder Engagement for the Rosen Group in Washington, D.C. Dr. Murray is also a national public speaker and the Chief Operating Officer of Invest in Others, LLC, an educational consulting firm, and a published author of 2 student handbooks, College Planning Strategies, I Wish Someone Had Told Me, and College Funding Strategy, I Wish Someone Had Told Me. Please help me welcome Dr. Christie Murray.
This is Cedric Francis, and you're listening to Lead to Greatness.
I was shy growing up. I was very close to my mother, and my sisters were probably more of the extroverts. I would classify myself then, and to some degree still now, as an introvert. My sisters would be up bouncing around, participating in different activities, etc., and I would be glued sitting right next to my mother.
Right.
One day we were sitting in church, and she noticed my sisters were singing in the choir, they were ushering, they were volunteering, and where was I? Sitting right next to my mother. And so one day, I think it just kind of hit her, and she looked over at me and she says, "Why aren't you doing anything?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she says, "Well, they're, participating and active, but why are you sitting here?" "Why? I want to just be close to you, Mom." And so she leaned over in church and she said, "Well, if I go to hell, does that mean you want to go too?" And I leaned back over and I said, "Mm-hmm." In that moment, I think she realized that she had to kind of push me out of my comfort zone.
Wow.
And so from that time forward, even though I still have some very near and dear introverted tendencies, I no longer had a choice to be just sitting up under my mother. And that just really led to me gaining more confidence in myself, giving me the ability to reach out and help other people, to volunteer and participate. And I've been going 160 miles an hour since.
Wow.
I share that story because I think that it's important to embrace who you are. And as someone who loves to spend time with herself and more in my own head, I have had to learn over the years to develop skills to be able to communicate effectively and interact with other people. The story that I want to really tell is, I'm going to try to be very brief about it, but fast forward years later, my sisters are in college. They're twins. They're in college. And I hit my senior year of high school, and I watched my sister struggle, my parents struggle with 2, daughters in school at the same time. And I'm going on all these college tours, and I finally go to Hampton University to visit. And when I left the campus, I said, "Woof, I loved it there." I was all excited, came home, told my parents, "Hey, I know where I want to go to school. I want to go to Hampton University. I want to major in engineering." My mom said, "Well, that's great, but you do know Hampton is a private school." I said, "Okay." And she said, "It's more expensive than an in-state public school, and I need you to choose a different college." And so we went back and forth. "I'm not choosing a different college." "Well, I can't afford it," until she finally said, "Hey, look, I'm happy to help you get there, but you're going to have to figure out how to pay for it. We've got to come up with some approaches to pay for it."
Yeah.
So I started looking for scholarships, and this is back in 1993-ish, before the internet, so I couldn't Google scholarships.
Right.
So looking for those things were a bit different than the reality of today. But I started telling different people what I wanted to do, including my school counselor. And one day I'm at school, and she pulls me out of an auditorium and she says, "Hey, Christy, come back to my office. What if I told you I just had this scholarship cross my desk, and they're looking for a student who's interested in going to Hampton University and majoring in engineering?" Now I got goosebumps when I heard that, because I'm like, how more exact can you be? And she said, "Are you interested?" And I said, "Absolutely." And so she said, "There's only one caveat. Has to be postmarked by tomorrow." And I'm now postmark, and I always explain this when I talk to students. It's not emailed, it's not sent over the internet. It's put in the mailbox, stamped by the post office by tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so she said, can you make that happen? And I said, the question is, can you get my transcripts out that quick? Because schools have a process and they can be pretty slow at times. And so she looked back at me and she said, I'm going to do everything I can to get your transcripts out by tomorrow. Fast forward, a couple of interviews later, I was selected for the scholarship. That scholarship came with 4 years of tuition, every summer internship with that company, and a full-time job when I graduated from college.
Wow.
Had that package the day I graduated from high school. And so I felt so inspired and incredibly blessed to have had that unique opportunity that I told myself that if I'm ever given the opportunity to help others, I would absolutely do the same and pay it forward. 4 years go by, I graduate. I'm getting ready to graduate my senior year of college, and I already have a job. All I had to do was maintain a 2.5. And so on the campus, we had all these companies, IBM, Exxon, all these big companies coming to interview students. Well, I already have a job, but I go to this, I think it was a Texaco interview, nevertheless. And it was with a female. I'll never forget her. And we interview. And at the end, she says, well, Christie, why are you here? You know, I'm only looking for chemical engineers and you're electrical. And I said, oh, yes, ma'am, I'm aware. And I already have a job. And she said, so I'm not quite, she said, you know, you did a great job on the interview, but I'm not quite sure why you're here. And I said, well, I just thought it would be a great opportunity to network, learn something about a new industry, and give myself a chance to really just refine my interview skills. She said, She said, okay. She said, well, I really appreciate it. She probably thought, well, she didn't wasted an hour of my time.
Right.
But, you know, she thanked me and, you know, and we went our separate ways. A year later, I'm working at this company who gave me the scholarship. It was probably a year later. And one day I randomly get a phone call. And it's the same woman I interviewed with from Texaco.
Wow.
She said, hey, we're looking for engineers out in Houston, Texas. Are you interested in an interview? Well, sure I am. Dusted off my resume, flew out there, interviewed, and the rest was history. And that was really my introduction 23 years ago into the oil and gas industry. So I started out as an electrical engineer, working for several pipeline transmission companies. And then I moved over to operations and then to management. And then I just spent the last 10 years on the federal side of the same industry. And this all ties back to my leadership story. There's so many life lessons I've learned through this journey that you don't find, you have to keep yourself prepared and do everything you can to position yourself because you never know where opportunities are going to manifest themselves and show up in your life.
Yes.
So I learned early on that there were no mistakes. You don't meet people by accident, and any opportunity is an opportunity. So I've been in this industry, the energy industry, for example, for the past 23 years. And I've had the unique pleasure for the pipeline companies that transport the product, or the federal regulatory agency, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, who regulates many of these companies. And now I work for the road group. I'm excited about that, and a new division that we recently stood up with stakeholder engagement over the last year or so, and that's a technology service provider. Through all of those interactions, I had unique opportunities for career progression. I started out mentioning that I was an engineer. Well, engineers sometimes have their own connotations with what that means. They think you're an introvert. They think you see things just in black and white, and usually they don't have the best communication skills. Yeah. And so one of the things that I realized is that I have to learn how to communicate with people and do it well. And you can have the best idea, but if you can't sell it, if you can't articulate it, and you can't persuade people to see your side of it, or to at least compromise and have something in common, then you're not talking about anything. And it really doesn't matter what profession you're in. And so that is really the early journey. So got to where I am professionally today. I will also tell you that I never lost track of how I got here. And so years ago, and there's another interesting story with that. I'm working in the federal government one day, probably about 4 years ago. And I was talking to somebody, and I don't know who it was. And I anonymously got a book in the mail. I told somebody that I was interested in writing my first book. And so somebody sent me a book, and I still don't know who it was, about how to write a book.
Oh, man.
Came home, and one of the things the book said is talk to people who know you very well and ask them what you naturally or passionate about and you should write about. And at the time, it was my 16-year-old oldest son who said, well, Mama, you're always helping students and families offline and informally with their college planning. Why don't you write a book about that? And in that moment, the light bulb came on.
Oh, man.
And I knew what I needed to do. Long story short, I took that. I started doing free workshops at libraries, bringing in families in my community and sharing with them everything that I knew, getting their good questions answered. And I would, the things that they asked me about were things that I took for granted knowing. And I eventually ended up starting my own business. I ended up writing my book. I told myself I'd have it written by the time my son, that 16-year-old, graduated from high school. So less than 2 years later, it was less than that, I published my first book, College Planning Strategies. I wish somebody had told me.
Awesome.
There are a lot of things in here I do wish somebody had told me. And that light bulb that came on that day with my son is the theme of my series.
Wow.
So that's what I do when I can do without thinking about it, is helping students, families get accepted into college. And even in those conversations with talking to families about getting into schools, so many times people say, well, Christie, we got in, but now we got to figure out how to pay for it.
Right.
And that's when I realized I had a need for a second book,
Wow.
College Funding Strategies, that I wish someone had told me.
I love it.
I wrote these books. I will consult with families. I will speak virtually with groups and entities, even in person outside of COVID, about these realities. And I share practical tips with them as a part of my effort to give back and share knowledge. We make assumptions that people have the same knowledge we have on so many different things. And when you slow down enough and you pay attention to the people around you, you'll quickly learn that you might have more insights on some things than they do, and vice versa. And it's an opportunity to help close the knowledge gap for some.
I know you're talking about your two twin sisters. So are you the baby?
I am.
So the baby of the family. What was your experience, being the baby of the family? I seen it as a benefit. How did you see it?
I do too. I think we had the best seat in the house.
Yeah.
I call it team youngest.
Yes.
Even with my youngest son and my nieces and nephews, we have these family competitions about grades and how they're showing up. Right. And team youngest is out excelling sometimes team oldest in my particular family.
Right.
Growing up, I will tell you that I had the opportunity and benefit to learn from my sisters and my mother. My mother she was a teenage mother. She was pregnant with my sisters at 16. She had me at 18. So I grew up with my sisters and my mother. Yeah. And my mother is one of the strongest people I know, and one of the reasons why I am always in pursuit of helping other people and excellence and just strength. And so being the youngest, I had a unique opportunity to learn from my sisters. In fact, when they were going to college, I thought they did it all wrong. But there was a bigger plan in that. Absolutely. I watched my parents do all the planning for them. Yeah. And so the reason why, and I didn't talk about this yet, but I always talk about it when I talk to students, the reason why I was able to get that application in 24 hours is because I had a system. I watched my sisters, my older sisters. This is the connection between the oldest and youngest. I watched them get it all wrong and didn't exert any effort into their own process. And I said, I'm not doing that. So at home, when she pulled me out of the auditorium that day, I had a stack of applications I had pre-filled out for other things I could pull from. I had pre-drafted essays that I typed on a typewriter back in the day. And I had letters of recommendation that I made copies of and could reuse. So when they had a package and they said, we need this, this, and this, I was literally pulling from stacks I had already prepared. But it was only because I was able to learn from watching my sister.
Wow, that's a knowledge bomb. I want to, man, we got to deal with this. You mentioned systems. And so systems with you, I mean, even transitioning, from your household to college, you understood how important systems were. Let me ask you this question, moving into leadership and entrepreneurship, how important is systems? Why should or why not every leader, entrepreneur, business owner, small business, large business, why should we have a system?
I think you should have a system, and I'll tell you why I do, because it helps me to stay organized. Get mentally prepared to declutter how I think and how I'm moving. Yeah. It helps me to be able to methodically lay out what needs to happen. Stephen Covey said back in the day, beginning with the end in mind, either Stephen or
Yes, Stephen.
Begin with the end in mind. And so I always have to think about where I'm trying to get to and back my way up to what do I need to do today to get there tomorrow?
Yes.
And so by having those systems, I don't have to keep it all in here. It can be repeatable, it could be executable, it can be shareable.
Yes.
As a leader, you're not necessarily going to be doing all the work. So you have to be able to create a vision and show people a way forward that they can actually visualize and to rally behind. You can't do that if you're all over the place. And it starts with self-management.
I love that, man. That's a knowledge bomb, man. Here you are. You're doing a lot of different things. Education, the oil and gas industry. Let me ask you this question. Tell us about your diverse background.
I think that's a good question. When I first started out as an engineer, I had a supervisor and he told me something. You're an engineer.
Mhm.
He said, but always stay diversified.
Mm.
Say perfect your craft, but don't limit yourself to being able to do one thing well.
Oh man.
Now, I believe in multiple streams of income. I believe in multiple skill sets that you can bring to the table. First of all, when I think of leadership, I don't think of leadership in terms of a position. I think of it in terms of a mindset. So even when my children were younger, I would tell them, you are already a leader and you need to be thinking about how you're going to show up and add value. When people start making reductions and people start figuring out how to do more with less, you
Yeah.
want to always be on the more side because you bring extra value to the table that ordinarily they wouldn't expect from just one individual. And so over my career, I went back and got a master's degree in computer information system. Okay, I've checked the technical boxes,
Yeah.
but I'm just not an atypical engineer. So I went back and got a business degree or two.
Right.
And so I wanted to really have some balance to how I just my mindset. And I didn't really go to school multiple times after my bachelor's for other people's purposes. I did it because I wanted to be able to critically think differently across many different spectrums myself.
Right.
And because of that, I've been able to move in and out of the energy industry over the last 23 years. I started out in manufacturing and then moved to energy and been in energy ever since for the most part. But I'll tell you this, I've been on the private sector side, I've been on the federal side, now I'm on the service provider side. And each one of them bring with its own diverse approaches and mindsets. And so there's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of uniqueness to each one of those different type of sectors that has certainly shaped my respect and appreciation for each.
You have so much value up on yourself based on all these different areas. And I want to touch on one thing before we move on, because you said you were naturally an introvert. And because this is the thing, we have listeners that are introverts and they have great ideas. They have the skills. They have the God-given ability to make things happen. But because they can't relay it, because they can't communicate it. And this is the thing, because I believe because most people don't know, but I am also introvert. And I love it because I can switch on and switch off. Being able to do both, what is the benefit in that in your life?
Huge benefit. It's the difference between limiting your options and capabilities and making an infinite amount of opportunities that you can open up for yourself. Sometimes we put ourselves or we allow other people to keep us in a box.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I would share is give yourself permission to remove the box. Just because I'm an introvert, it does not mean that I have to stay an introvert in every situation. And to me, the epitome of leadership is being versatile. You have to be able to change it up, whether it's your style, whether it's your normal, natural way of being and thriving. You have to be able to change it up to fit the particular environment or the setting that you're in. Those who advance or progress in different ways based on what their goals are have the ability to have situational awareness,
Mhm.
to look around and figure out, wait a minute, something is off, check the temperature in this room. I need to dial it up or dial it down, and then be able to switch. Oh, you know what? It's time for me to put my eye up and pull out my E hat. Oh, hey, how you doing?
Wow.
To meet people where they need to be. Leadership is about meeting people where they need to be, not where you need to be.
Wow.
That's self-leadership. Both are equally important, but it's the people leadership part where you want to invite others on the journey to either help you in some way or be helpful to them, where you have to get out of your normal comfort zone. My normal comfort zone is an I, like you.
Yeah.
But I realized I have to sometimes put my E hat on, go out, and I'm drained at the end of the day.
Yes. Oh
I
yeah.
have to take that E back off, and then I have to recharge myself in I mode, spend
Yeah.
some time with myself.
Yeah.
But both are important, but you have to have some flexibility in your style. You cannot be rigid and be an effective leader. You
Mm.
can't say, well, I've always done, I've always been. Well, I don't do this and I don't do that in terms of how you communicate or willing to interface and connect with people
Right.
and wonder. And then you may question why you're not getting the results that you really want. There's a link between your effort and your results.
Mm. I love it. As far as your leadership style, what is a significant contributing factor of your leadership style?
I think that one of the significant factors for me is the moment when I realized that it had nothing to do with a position that I held.
Mm.
That's powerful. It's very empowering when you think about your life as a child of somebody's, as a spouse, a parent, maybe a friend, a coworker, in a community. And you can empower yourself to show up because I think it's a mindset and
Mm.
not a position.
Yeah.
You can show up in any situation with courage, with respect, with integrity, caring for other people all day. There is nothing that's preventing you from showing up and behaving or feeling like a leader and
Yeah.
thinking like a leader. So, how I learned what really stuck out to me, I've had some really great people who were leaders in my environment, and I've had some that weren't so great.
Yeah.
So I've learned to sit back and observe those traits and attributes that I thought were positive and constructive and helpful. And more importantly, sit back and watch the ones that were not.
Woo! Yes.
And here's what I'll tell you about the ones that were not. When you sit back and you watch other people and you think about how they show up in
Mm.
front of others, you can ask yourself now, is that now wait a minute. That's kind of controlling or micromanaging or manipulating. Is that how you choose to show up? And you get to decide for yourself
Mm.
what that looks like for you. And so I would say the thing that has really been a contributing factor for me is sitting back and observing and really keeping the best of the best and letting go of the worst I had seen. And I made a conscious decision not to treat people the way I've been treated.
Mm. Yes. Knowledge bomb.
Now, in your next podcast, we can get into how to treat folks or, those experiences. But I'll tell you, everybody who wears a title isn't a leader. And you don't have to have power to be a leader. I had an employee when I worked in the federal government, probably just a couple years ago. She came in my office and she was one of the junior people on my staff. And she was so frustrated. And she was like, I just don't have any power to change this, this, and this. And I sat back in my chair and I giggled. And she's like, well, why are you giggling? And I said, my dear, you don't need power. You need influence.
Ooh. Ooh.
And limit your ability to influence. I have gotten some of the most impactful decisions made without being the smartest one in the room
Mhm.
or the one at the highest hierarchy in the organization, because it's your influence and credibility that you bring with you to a situation that can shape or make that outcome look different.
Man, that is so amazing. That is a knowledge bomb. This is good. This is good. Let's talk a little bit about college. How did you come to help scholars with college planning and funding?
I realized when I got to school that not everybody had the same blessed opportunity I did, and I watched friends of mine struggle. Some of them didn't come back after our freshman year because they couldn't afford it. Fast forward years after I graduated from college, I started speaking with youth groups and hearing more about their stories. But I always stayed connected with trying to just pass along information in a very informal way.
Right.
It wasn't until I had my own children and I would be standing, they've been playing football, organized football, tackle football since they were 5 and 7.
Mm.
And so many days sitting on the sidelines talking to other parents, I mean, educated people with careers in the Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. area, people who have careers, who had been to college, and they still struggle with access to information to really solidify what that whole system or process could be about.
Mm.
And I was like, well, you didn't do this? And you didn't have your son do that? And they're like, well, no, well, what did you do? And then I helped my niece. This was one of the key moments. My niece had a 3.2 GPA in high school. And I knew my sister, who's a teacher, couldn't afford to really send her to college outright on her own. So my mother and I decided we were going to pool together our money, spend $500 and put her in a SAT prep course. She took the prep course, and immediately after we had her go retake the test. Like finished on a Thursday, test on a Saturday. Wow. Blew it out of the water, ended up getting a scholarship to school with a 3.2 GPA.
Amazing.
And when I talk to people now and I say, well, do you think $500 is a lot of money? Yes, it is. You know what I tell them? Cut down on a couple pair of your teenager sneakers, cut down on a couple of their fast food meals, but make it happen. Because that $500 we paid, it covered $120,000 worth of tuition. So this is what I tell people. Either you struggle early or you'll struggle often and longer. And so sometimes you just have to be willing to make a sacrifice in the short term for long-term gain. Fast forward, I'd used some very interesting techniques with my niece. I had her develop what I call a scholar profile. I have it now. In both my books, they both come with templates. I don't just talk to students. I give them practical templates that they can download from my website and use. One of them is the scholarship profile. It's a one-page resume. And it tells the story of who you are on paper. Wow. So you can attach it with a scholarship application or college application. And either way, it'll help differentiate you from the competition. So after doing that and talking to more people, and they're saying, well, can you share this? Can you share that? And then hearing my son say, well, you should write a book. It all really just made sense. And I've been praying about it. I wanted to write a book starting in 2011. And it wasn't until probably 2016, 2017 that it happened, because I kept saying, I'm going to pray on it. And I don't want to just write a book about me. I want to write a book to help other people. And in that moment, my prayer was answered because I knew exactly what I had to do. And I've been helping students ever since, not just to graduate school, but graduate debt-free.
I love it. So I'm listening, all these things you did. I mean, everything is not about you, starting from the game, your son's game, and you begin to get systems. You see the problem and you begin to help people. And through that, a book and a business and a movement has come out of just a conversation. Wow.
You know what my vision is? My vision is to one day be able to create my own scholarship program where I can send students to school for 4 years myself, large groups of students.
Wow. Investors. Are you listening? You just spoke that into this airway right here. Is going to happen. It's going to happen. What characteristics, values, qualities do you feel every great leader should have?
The first thing I would say, and I don't want to get too technical in terms of terms, but emotional intelligence. I used to do these talks about leadership, and people would show up and they thought I would be talking about how they were going to lead other people. And I switched it and talked about, first, you got to be able to lead yourself. And emotional intelligence gets to the heart of, are you self-aware of how you show up? How you show care for other people? How you pay attention to those things that either create or tear down? How you take care of yourself and exhibit discipline and focus in your own life? Because a lot of times people watch your behavior. They watch who you are and how you show up. And then they try to follow suit if you're somebody that they can follow or not. You generally don't have to drag people along if you are tending to the business of leading yourself. I can't tell you how many organizations that I've worked in where I had people not leaving my team, but other people's employees wanting to join my team. I'm going to work hard. We're going to get the job done with a level of excellence and quality. We're going to have fun doing it, but we're also going to grow ourselves in the process. And so one of those key characteristics for me is being able to take a look back at myself and say, you know what, I did not show up my best self in this moment. Or I don't know as much about this as I need to. I might need to sharpen my skills around X, Y, or Z. And I think leaders have to be in pursuit of knowledge. It doesn't all come from a formal, college education or training, but you have to be in pursuit. You have to stay hungry to learn more about what you don't know. And you can't make the assumption that you're the resident expert in any room. In fact, I always tell myself, if I'm the smartest person in the room, I need to get in a new room, because you can't grow. You can't grow that way. And you have to be, this is something is very important to me, but I haven't been as good at it until probably, or at least more aware of it. I won't even say I'm good at it now.
Mhm.
Being vulnerable, being able to show your vulnerability as
Yeah.
a leader.
Yes.
Now, because I'm an introvert, you don't need to know all my business. I'm gonna keep this over here. Hey, how you doing? I'm good. I'm good. And that's pretty much the extent of it.
Right.
But people want to know that you're human, that you make mistakes, that the wheels fall off and you put them back on the track, that you hurt, that you have pain, that you are human. And so I had to learn. I actually had an employee. It came up one year 3 times from 3 different places. An employee said it. I would ask my staff to give me feedback. How do you think I'm showing up? What can I do to remove barriers to help you to be successful, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And one of them said to me, "Well, Christy, it would be great if you could show more vulnerability." Huh, very interesting. And then I had someone else, a peer, my peer group across the organization, to say, we'd love to see more vulnerability. And I realized, well, what does that mean? So I
Mm.
had to go into exploration. What does vulnerability mean? They don't pay me to come to work and put all my business out, that sort of thing. So I'm, tightening up around it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what I realized, and I kept asking people, what do you think it means? What does it mean to you? Until it finally hit me. People just want to know more about who you are, not what you do,
Yeah.
but who you are. And I said, I can do that a little bit more. And I started doing that. And people like, okay, when I started making mistakes, own them.
Yeah.
People were like, you know what? I would actively say, I did not do that right. Let me get this pause. Let me pause and fix this.
Yeah.
People want to know that you are human. So I took that as one of those things that great leaders have. They have some human aspect to what they do. And this is another big one for me, taking care of people that work for me, people that I work for, people who I care about, just people in general. And it kind of ties back to what you talked about earlier, standing on the sideline at the football field. A lot of people would hoard information. Even with my books, I'll openly talk about if any of you ask me any question in my book, I'm not gonna say, well, buy the book. No, we're not doing that. I'm not the keeper of information. I am the disseminator of information because I've been blessed to be able to share what somebody has shared with me. And so I think it's important to be able to do that, taking care of other people, particularly people who are vulnerable, who need access or are underprivileged or underrepresented, and making sure they have the same access to whatever resources you might be able to share. It could be time, money, whatever it looks like, but being in a position to be able to help other people and care for other people. The last thing that I'll touch on, and I can talk all day on this, but one of the other things that I'll share is being resilient.
Ah.
If nothing else, this whole COVID experience, pandemic experience, has certainly taught us all how to show up and to leverage, dig deep for our resiliency capabilities. When I first switched from the private sector to federal service, and every 4 years, you got your presidential administration changing out, and you're stopping and you're flanking in different directions. It took me a minute. And that's why I do appreciate those experiences to say, wait a minute, we just did, oh, wait, now we have to do this. What? This didn't make sense. And you know what I quickly realized was that this change is constant. What kind of leader do you want to be? Do you want to be anxious about change? Or do you want to go ahead and prepare yourself mentally to navigate through it? And so I realized you have to be resilient to be able to keep pace and even sometimes get ahead of what you know or may anticipate is to come. But you can't just dig your heels in and ignore the fact that change and time waits for no one. And effective leaders have to be able to prepare themselves and to prepare and inspire other people to continue as well.
Oh man, knowledge bomb. Dr. Christie Murray, folks. Man, this is awesome, awesome interview. Man, this is fun. I'm telling you, if you're okay, I'm gonna do it. We're gonna do it live in front of everyone. I want to have you on sometime, maybe perhaps in the fall. Man, there's so much more coming, more questions. I have a list of questions down here that I really want to ask you, and I want to get to them. If you accept the invitation,
I
right?
accept. We can align on dates and make it
Aw-
happen.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. I am definitely excited. Your story is awesome. What you're doing is awesome. And I believe the people that's in your interview, doors is gonna open for you, even for people that listen, say, you know what, I want to pour into what she's doing because man, you're doing some great things. And I applaud you for it right here on on the Lead to Greatness podcast. I applaud you right here. Awesome, 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 awesome. So if someone wanted to connect with you and what you're doing, where should they go?
They should go to my website, www.invest, the letter N, and then the word others with an S.com.
On behalf of the Lead to Greatness community, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and adding value to us.
You're absolutely welcome.
And don't forget to subscribe to Lead to Greatness if this is your first time. And this podcast was helpful to you, leave a big thumbs up. And also, I want you to check out our Marriage Coach podcast, the podcast with my wife and I. If you're on iTunes, please rate this podcast and leave a review and help get the word out. Again, thank you, Lead to Greatness Nation, for joining us on today. Looking forward to seeing you again on next week. Till then, remember, if you help others reach their greatest potential, together we can change the world. Peace. We out.